everyone, it's Pearl and welcome back to my channel. Today is the day that I finally do probably the most requested video ever on my channel. On my Instagram, I post a lot of my animations, and whenever I do, my comments get flooded with questions asking if I can make a tutorial on how to do them, or just asking how I make them. So open up Blender 2.79, but you're going to need to know how to make a GFX. If you don't know how to make one, I have a tutorial on my channel that you can go and follow. Open up Blender. We're using Blender 2.79, so click anywhere on the screen, and then at the top, make sure you're in Cycles Render. The next step is to open up your rig. I'm not going to be explaining how to make a GFX in this video, so the first step is to just make a normal GFX. Make sure that you have transform and then orange into geometry. I know it's quite cliche, but I'm just going to do a simple wavy animation. I now need to add a camera by clicking Shift and A and then clicking Camera. Unlike when making a normal GFX, you want to keep the default size of the animation camera, unless you don't want it to be an intro, but if you want to make an intro that fits in like a YouTube video, which is what all of my animations are, then I really recommend keeping the size because it's the perfect size you need. Once you have this all set up, go to the globe icon, make sure ambient occlusion is turned on, then head into the render view and decide what color you want the background to be. I'm going to use like a blue that looks like this. Once you have your beginning pose, it's time to start animating. How do you animate? I'm going to try my best to explain. I'm sorry if it's not perfect. I want this arm to be waving. Click the limb or the item you want to animate, then come to the bottom and find this red dot, click it, and you'll know it's clicked when there's a key that shows up. This is super important because without this, the animation won't work. Now, this is optional, but I recommend dragging up this timeline at the bottom just to make it a bit easier to see. And to give your screen a bit more space, just drag this in. Those two are both optional, but they just help give you more space to work with. This is where it gets a bit confusing. Right here is your timeline. Every 10 frames is 1/10 of a second, so they're very small and spread out. Now our animation is going to start on 0 frames, so drag this green dot and make sure that's at the very beginning. I want this arm to start here. This is super important. With every limb or item you animate, you need a starting position. You need to go into the green line, then use the move tool and click any of the arrows. As you can see, if I move this, there's a yellow line that appears. For every limb you want to animate, you must do this, so I will animate this arm first. Now I have this yellow line, I need to decide when I want it to be where. I'm going to move mine 15 frames. You can tell right here. You can make yours like 20 frames. I recommend like between 15 to 20 frames for a normal movement, but for bigger or longer movements, spread them out, or for shorter movements, make them a bit closer. At 1 frame, this starts just where it normally is. Then at 15 frames, I want it to be up in the air. I'm going to bring this upwards. So now I have the position I want it to be in 15 frames. If I drag this green line back to frame 1, I can use this play button at the bottom, and I can see, look, now it's animated. So I have this here, that's great, but now I want to animate it to make the arm moving. So at 30 frames, I'm going to have it bend outwards, and I think that's good. Now I want to bend the elbow, so to bend another limb, go back to frame 1, go back to the move tool and click any of the arrows. Now there's another yellow dot, then go ahead to where you want it to start and bend it outwards, and then go to 30 or wherever your next frame is, and this needs to come all the way inwards. Now let's head back to 0, click the little play button at the bottom, and see how this looks. It looks really good. So we now have that limb fully animated. Now repeat this process with whatever other parts you want to animate. For this arm, I'm just going to do some simple movements. So again, go back to frame 1, use the arrows to create a starting line. Then at this one, I'll do 20 for this one just to show you that you can do different time frames. At 20, I will have this, let's say, come up and in. I'll just have a smaller movement since it's not as many frames. There, now we have another limb animated. Now, lastly, I'm going to animate the head. So now, if we head back into the camera and go back to the first frame and click play, look, it's fully animated. Now it's time to animate the camera. So I think this is a really good thing to do because it just makes it more visually interesting to look at. To animate the camera, right click to select the camera box and then use the same keys as we did before to decide where you want it to start at. Now as you can see, a yellow line will form. I'm going to make at 15 frames, I just want it to move in and up a bit just to have a bit of a subtle movement. And then at 30 frames, I want it to be off the screen so that it can say my username or whatever else I want for the intro. Now let's head back to the beginning and see how this animation looks when we play it. I really like how that looks. Now we need to set it up to be all done. The first thing you need to do is set an end to your animation. This is super important because if you don't, it will have to render all the way up to 250 frames, which will take forever. Set an end when your animation stops. For me, that is at 30 frames. Click enter, and now our animation ends. Head over to the camera icon, and like I said earlier, keep the dimensions, but change this from 100 to 80. You can leave the video format, but this next step is super important, and if you forget it, it is honestly like so frustrating. You need to pick a location that when your GFX is rendered, it will be saved to. Now when you make a normal GFX, once it's done rendering, then you choose where you can save it. But with an animation, you can't do that. When it's done, it'll automatically save. Click this little folder icon, and then you need a place for it to save. So on my desktop, I have a folder called Save GFXs where I save all of my animations to. Pick the folder, and then in the top right, click accept. So now as you can see, it has been saved. If I head into the rendered view, I can see that it is all done. And as you can see, if I click any of these, the movement is different. Now our animation is fully complete, which is great. So to render the animation, scroll up on the camera icon and click animation. Here is the finished product. I hope this video helped you guys a lot. If it did, please let me know in the comment section down below. And if you follow this tutorial in any way, make sure to tag me on Instagram so I can see it. And thank you for watching. Bye, pearls!